Hello, Tristan with Provo Health here. Today I want to talk about something that Janik and I talk about it all the time, but I don't think we've actually done a video on it. And it's one that's really, really important. And that is, I want to talk about heartburn, indigestion, gastroesophageal reflux disease, the whole thing. So to start with, here's how the scenario usually plays out for people. They're experiencing heartburn probably for quite a while. And so they go to the store, they buy some Tums, and they take Tums, and the heartburn goes away. Everything's great. They do that every day for a long, long time. And then they start to develop major digestive issues down the line, but no heartburn, right? Another scenario that plays out, people experience heartburn. It's really bad heartburn, so they go to the doctor. The doctor prescribes a proton pump inhibitor, right? Prilosec, something like that. Or some other acid blocker, and it takes away the heartburn like magic. And you do that for a long, long time, and down the line you develop some major digestive issues. And these scenarios play out way too often because these two approaches, through the Tums, through the proton pump inhibitors, acid blockers, they are both doing literally the opposite of what we need to have done when we're experiencing heartburn in most cases. Because here is what actually is going on when you've got heartburn happening in most cases. I have to say that because there are very rare situations where it's not this way. But what's really going on is that we do not have enough stomach acidity. And when we do not have enough stomach acidity, there's a valve in it. I'm going to show you. It connects it's the separator between your stomach and your small intestine. It's called the pyloric sphincter. And its job is to allow the chyme, that's the mixed up, partially digested food in your stomach, to get from your stomach into your small intestine, where the next phase of digestion can take place. The trigger for the pyloric sphincter is a specific pH level in your gut. And that means that your gut needs to reach a certain level of acidity in order for it to function properly. If you don't have sufficient stomach acidity, that valve never opens to allow the chyme to move down into the small intestine. And if that never happens, there are several issues that go on. Most importantly, all of that food, the proteins, the carbs, the fats, they just sit in your stomach and they fester. They're not being digested because it's not acidic enough in there. They're not being broken down. They're just fermenting. Those carbs are literally fermenting, and the proteins are going bad. The fats are going rancid, and it creates gases. And these gases start to float up into your esophagus. And guess what happens? It's uncomfortable. It causes heartburn. It causes indigestion, right? It causes the burping and all of that awfulness. Not because there's too much stomach acid that's splashing up in there, because there's not enough. So what that means is that when you're taking Tums, you are actually reducing the acidity, right? You are alkalizing the stomach area and basically guaranteeing that that pyloric sphincter is going to stay shut, not going anywhere. If you take a proton pump inhibitor or some other acid blocker, you are guaranteeing, because it is not going to be acidic enough down there, that pyloric sphincter is going to stay shut and say no entry. So what happens long term when that happens? Well, eventually, yes. Eventually things get forced down there and they are able to their way through the rest of the digestive tract. But they're festering, they're fermenting, and they're basically turning into food for bad bacteria, right? So you start to develop dysbiosis in your gut. They are also more likely to putrefy and get stuck in your gut. And when that happens, you are starting to basically weaken your gut lining and make it more porous. And that leads to what can sometimes be called leaky gut syndrome, right? And when that happens, you can develop autoimmune issues. You can just feel really terrible, get all kinds of problems going on. Down the line, that sort of thing could even lead to the perfect environment for cancer to start growing. And that, that's just the tip of the iceberg of what can go on. So if the problem is not enough stomach acidity, then what's the solution? More stomach acid, right? A more acidic stomach environment. And how do we do that? Really, our favorite way to do that at Provo Health is to increase stomach acidity with hydrochloric acid. Hydrochloric acid helps to increase that stomach acidity. It also helps to break down all of the proteins, the fats especially, but also and create a really nice chyme that's ready for the next phase of digestion in the small intestine where all the nutrients can be taken up. And of course, most importantly, it allows that pyloric valve to open up and allow things to move on so that they aren't going rancid and festering and fermenting. Our favorite product for this is Zypan from Standard Process because in addition to the hydrochloric acid, it also contains pancreatic enzymes. But there really are a lot of good products out there that do that. However, finding the right dose can be a little bit of a process because if you do get too much stomach acid, or too much stomach acidity is probably the right word for that, then that can also cause discomfort, in which case that would be one of those cases where the proton pump inhibitors or the TUMs actually are helping something. But the way that you figure this out is you start with a very low dose and you see how you feel. For a day, with every meal, you take a low dose and see whether you feel the same, better, or worse. If you feel worse, if you're taking a low dose and you're feeling worse, it can mean one of two things. One, it could mean that you've got an ulcer because that's going to hurt an ulcer. Or two, it could mean that you already have sufficient stomach acid and you've just pushed it up too high. I find that that is very, very rare. It doesn't happen very often, but it can happen. If you feel the same or better, then the next day you increase that dose a little bit and you take a little bit more with each meal and you see, do I feel the same, better, or worse? If you feel better or the same, you increase again the next day and then the next day and the next day until you reach a point where you feel worse. As soon as you feel worse, you go back down to the previous dose where you felt good and you stay there. And that's how you know how much hydrochloric acid you need added into your system so that you can properly digest, allow your digestion to heal, and then hopefully you don't need it. It's not something that you need long term. One of the really nice things about hydrochloric acid, it's not like a hormone where because you're taking it, your body stops producing it. As long as you've got your diet figured out, as long as everything is healed up in your digestive system, that should function just right and give you the proper stomach acidity all on its own. But it takes time. And while that's happening, the Zypan, the hydrochloric acid, is definitely your best route forward. So hopefully this was helpful for you. Hopefully now you better understand that in most cases, that heartburn, indigestion, GERD is because of too low stomach acidity, not from too much stomach acidity. Hopefully now you understand that getting too much calcium or too much TUMs, too much proton pump inhibitors can actually make things worse. And hopefully now you know that hydrochloric acid or Zypan can be the solution as long as you titrate up properly. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me. Be happy to answer.